This Todd-versation is brought to you in part by Shift Creative. Start shifting. With promotional consideration from Volcano Produce.
Hey everybody, how y'all doing? We're glad you're here. I hope you're having a great day. It's always my wish for everybody every time we open the show, wishing you having a good day. That's what it's going to take. We all wish everybody a good day. Maybe it'll happen and we'll have a good day and the world will be a happier place. A happier world would be kind of cool, Lois. I do believe. I think letting some cool stuff happen in the world, get rid of some of this negative stuff would be awesome. I'm excited for my guest today. She's back. This is the go-to person. You want to learn something about water? This is the person to kind of break it down. I love how she writes. I love her team. I'm excited about this conversation because last time we were here, we were talking about not having water. And now we're going to talk about what the hell we're going to do with all this water because it ain't no better, just in the opposite direction. So please, everybody, welcome the CEO and editor of sjvwater.org. And by the way, type in that on the Google machine and subscribe to her newsletter so you can learn and get informed. Please welcome. This lady covers all the issues here in the central San Joaquin Valley and up and down the valley. What's going on? She is the big voice, and I'm excited to have her. Please, everybody, welcome Lois Henry. Hello, my friend. Welcome.
Hello.
I am thrilled you're here today. I really am. This is going to be a great conversation. I have no idea what the hell we're going to talk about. Like I told you, it's like, I don't know where to go with this because it's all over the board. But man, there's a lot of things we can get into right now. So I figured we just kind of go for it and see where it takes us.
Sure. There's no end to the subjects that we can cover.
Well, and I was emailing you, killed me last week on the email. And I said to you, I sent you a note. I said, do you ever stop shaking your head? And your reply was, it shakes constantly. It's just nonstop down here. And we've got some good perspective because I'm going to share a little bit what I've got. But I got stopped by a couple of people down at a conference in Los Angeles, and we were BSing about other things. And both these folks asked me about water. And I thought, yeah, what is Tulare Lake? What is all that about? I thought, you know what? I tried to explain it a little bit. I thought, hey, you know what we're going to do? We're going to get Lois on here. We're going to get the biggest brain I know out here to talk about water. And she's just going to unload on everybody and fill you up with a bunch of information about what you need to know. And one of the things that you shared with us last time you were here in September, and you taught me this, and I believe it today, and I hope people will reinforce that there is no such thing as California water. It doesn't exist. Water is a regional issue in the state of California, and there's a boatload of regional players involved in this. But it's not a state issue. It's really a regional issue. So I want people to be mindful of that as we talk today, because I think it's really, really important. The other thing I want to be mindful of is, as I'm framing all this up, is that when we talked back in September, we know we don't have any infrastructure. It's no better than from September to today, I'm quite sure. But, so we didn't have any infrastructure to begin with. Now we have all this rain. We still don't have any infrastructure. Now it's posing a whole bunch of other problems. So with that being said, I'm going to throw a couple of stats out. I'm rambling, but I'm going to shut up because I'm going to let you run the show anyways. I was going to get this shit out on the table first. But I thought it would be really relevant to give people some stats of what we're talking about when we think about water, right? So the Oroville Dam up north, Northern California, in December, I just want to give people some perspective on what this actually, what water really sounds like. The inflow over a 5-day period in December was 70,000 cubic feet of water per second. So folks, just hear this out. That is about 500,000 gallons of water entering the dam every second. That's the kind of water we're dealing with. It's not just it's not a glass of water, kids. It's a big old bucket of water. So with that being said, Lois, I'm just going to kind of ramble, throw some stuff out. I just wanted people to get some perspective. Your picture backdrop is not normally, a flooded street and whatnot. So I'm just going to be quiet, throw the first question. What's going on out there today?
That's Highway 43, by the way. It's not a street. Yeah. It's Highway 43 right before it closed. I was up there. Okay. So, there's a couple of different terms that you're going to want to keep in mind here. CFS and acre feet. CFS is cubic feet per second.
Right.
The way I liked it, a water manager one time years ago told me to envision it this way. Like you're standing beside a river or a canal and somebody tells you, oh, that's 100 CFS going by, 100 cubic feet per second. Well, a basketball is about the size of a cubic foot. So just think 100 basketballs a second going by. That's a lot. The Kern River on March 11th, after the March 10th storm, was flowing at 40,000 CFS past Kernville and into the lake. So yeah, you just have to kind of keep that sort of in mind. And that's
a lot of basketballs.
That's a lot of basketball. And then acre feet. everybody here talks about water, not in gallons, but in acre feet. And you want to envision a football field covered in a foot of water. That is about an acre foot. If that helps your visualization, I'm just kind of trying to lay.
Yeah, no. Well, it's totally confusing to people because they don't get it.
Yeah.
They don't understand. The volume's so hard to understand.
For some of this lingo. So it just gives you just an idea of the scale.
Sure.
Okay. So what we're dealing with right now is we had a lot of snow that came in over mostly late January, February, and early March, and it was low snow. Remember that it's very low elevation snow. It packed the upper reaches, but it also very critically packed the lower elevations. And then the reason we saw this massive surge, and you saw the press nationally go wild about this. Everybody's jumping into my beat, by the way, and parachuting in and doing stories, is because March 10th we had an atmospheric river that was warm and long and drenching. So it not only brought in a lot of its own moisture, it washed down that low elevation snow. So when that happened, you saw not just our reservoirs, because we have a number of reservoirs. We have Lake Isabella, which is on the Kern River. We have Kaweah Lake, which is Kaweah River. We have Lake Success, which is Tule River. We have Pine Flat Dam, which is Kings River. And we have Millerton Lake, which is San Joaquin River. And I'm only going to say, then you go up, into Merced County.
Well, you just keep climbing, right? You just keep climbing up the state.
So those are our controlled rivers. They're controlled because they're behind dams, and we can control a little bit of the. What happened March 11th was we also saw all of these rivers and streams that you've never heard of, I've never heard of, pop up out of nowhere. They just, because they come out of the foothills, they don't come out of upper reaches, and they don't flow into any of those dams. So we had Pozo Creek and White River and Deer Creek and Mill Creek and Cross Creek and Lewis Creek and Yokel Creek, and these places. I was just like, wait, what
creek?
And they not only started flowing, but they started flooding. And because there hasn't been any, we don't have any flood control agencies down here. We have a couple of I think almost all the valley except the San Joaquin River, and mostly that's just to the east over by Stockton. That comes under the Central Valley Flood Protection Board. And you would think Central Valley, we're part of the Central Valley. No, we are not under the purview of that board in terms of any overarching agencies or decision trees or handoff and understanding of who maintains this levee. Okay, now this is my boundary, now it's your boundary, all of these kind of the framework that you think exists does not exist in this valley. We have a couple of conservation districts, the Kaweah River Conservation District and the Kings River Conservation District. They maintain some levees up there in Kings and Tulare counties, but only for their boundaries. So you saw all these cities, they were like, well, we clean out the creek, but only to our boundaries, because then it goes into the county and it's not our. So this just created this massive widespread. I got pictures of it, like just debris that looked like timber yards, piled up against bridges, and then the water flooded out all over the place, or it just broke the banks and flooded out all over the place. So these tiny communities, Lindsay and Woodlake and all these little farm worker communities just got hammered. So that's the start of our flood story.
Right.
But that's only the start of our flood story.
Right.
Because now, so that lower elevation snow washed down, all that debris came down, all that junky, horrible water, from wildfire burn scars, it was washing down. It was just ugly, nasty, turbid stuff. So that's all down and happening, and then those little creeks have kind of receded back into their foothills. Now we are looking at, especially the Kern River watershed, we're looking at 400% of normal snowpack. Above Kaweah and Tule, it's close to 300%. Above Pine Flat, it's like 200%. These are millions of acre feet of water waiting to come down. So I've been talking to a lot of flood managers who've said, okay, this was tough. This was 24/7 for about 10 days after March 10th. Now we've got the Papa flood coming.
Right. So, this one's right. It's legit. I mean, it is, and it's not coming. It's going to be, sometime in June-ish, whatever it might be, could be into July, depending on where.
This month. May,
could be.
I think everybody knows who's planned a garden party outside in May because it's going to be nice in the valley. No matter what, if you plan something outside, it turns to 108 that day.
Yeah, it's Murphy's Law. Yeah.
I mean, the
there's no
one thing we know about this valley, it will heat up.
Thanks for joining the Todd-versation. And now, a word from our sponsor.
Thanks for listening to Todd-versations. This episode is sponsored by Shift Creative. Shift Creative brings a fresh approach to design and marketing. Shift's team of expert designers and strategists create content that connects and engages. Our clients are a collaborative part of our process, working directly with the creative team to build their award-winning projects. Specializing in branding, messaging, packaging, marketing, and websites with decades of experience serving the food, agricultural, service, and tech industries, Shift can help your brand to tell its story. Visit startshifting.com to get started. Make a difference with your marketing. Freshen up with Shift Creative.
Well, and we've already had some heat in the valley, which has already pushed the thing down. But, I mean, I was down on the river over the weekend a couple different times down looking, and I mean, it's the water is way wide. The gates are open. The water's coming out. I mean, there's work being done. It looks like to be shoring up the sides. There's a lot of things that are happening down there. There's some really concerned people, some concerned neighbors, because it's like waiting for Christmas. It's coming. It's just you're waiting, and it's going to be legit when this comes down. So what's next? I mean, everybody's got to be a little bit trying to figure out what to do.
Okay, so if you'll permit me a moment to rant a little bit.
Rant? Shit, girl, I brought you on to rant. That's why I got a full glass of vodka here. You just go. I mean, water. No.
Yeah, special water. So, okay, you're talking about the Kern River. We just have to keep it straight because
Sure.
there's so much going on up at the Tool River.
Well, everywhere's got it. Every which way. Everybody's got issues coming from every direction up and down the state at this point.
So we'll get a little bit mathy here, which I'm no good at, but you've got to understand what's happening on the Kern River to understand how nervous you should be and why the silence from certain government organizations is ticking me off incredibly. You've got a 429% snowpack. So that's 1.8 million acre feet in the snow ready to come into Lake Isabella. Okay, 1.8 million acre feet. Lake Isabella only holds 570,000 acre feet. It already is at I haven't looked lately, but it's like 350 acre feet are already taken up with water. So it only has 200 and some thousand acre feet. And you've got 1.8 million waiting to come down, right? And so you've got a fairly full reservoir, and they're only letting it out at 6,000, actually 5,800 CFS. So it's not draining. It's not going down because the inflow is higher than the outflow.
Right.
So say we've been very lucky in our spring so far this year, where it's not just that it's cooler temperatures during the day, but it cools off at night. And you've got that huge snowpack, which kind of creates its own Yeti kind of,
sure. Yeah, absolutely.
situation where but as we know, what we know about the valley is it does turn hot. And so once it starts getting going and that runoff starts coming down, the numbers are not in our favor.
Mm-mm.
I mean, you just cannot, I mean, that is like, what is it? 10 pounds of flour in a 2-pound sack.
Yeah.
What is going to happen? I did a story where I confirmed that there had been a vibration in the power plant that the Lake Isabella Dam feeds. The penstocks go through the dam and into the power plant. There was a vibration. That's not cool for a dam. And so they shut off the power plant and they moved the water out through the side gates. And I keep asking, like, well, what was the vibration? And how much can you move? And, and I'm just getting like a whole bunch of like, no, it's fine. Don't worry about it. We don't know. It's fine. The vibration wasn't our facility. It was the power plant. And I was like, yeah, but it was going through the power plant or through the dam.
Right.
So, not getting a lot of great information from the Army Corps of Engineers. And so then I turned to the city of Bakersfield. I mean, the Kern River runs through most of the city of Bakersfield. And I've been told that the channel is rated to be able to carry 8,000 CFS cubic feet per second, and that the levees on the side are rated by FEMA to be able to hold 10,200 CFS. Except then I find out that the city hasn't been able to get a clearing permit for the last 3 years, has not been able to clear the channel. So I started asking, who makes sure that these ratings are still
accurate,
applicable?
Yeah.
You know, I mean, we've got this water coming down, and the city's already had to haul out 96 tons of debris and haul it off. And there's still more stuff coming, and we know there's more water coming. And I'm like, okay, well, I'm trying to get a handle on what the heck is happening. And just like you said, and I've heard, you know, from other people who send me pictures every day, they're building new berms in certain areas, like over at Callaway. Why are you building new berms? I can't get the city to talk to me.
Yeah, I'm sure they probably don't have a good answer in a lot of ways, because this is uncharted waters. I made a water joke. Look at me go.
But here's the thing. Here's the thing, Todd. That's what the city is there to do.
I get it.
A government's I don't care what else they do. Their main priority is to protect the public, right?
Yeah.
And the public is watching this water rise, and they're asking questions, and they're asking questions of me. And so I go to the city. I'll just tell you, right before Good Friday, I call and I leave messages, and I'm like, hey, I need to talk to you about, I can't remember, it was something having to do with the river. And I know it's Good Friday tomorrow. If you can't meet tomorrow, can you talk to me on Monday? And I finally get, hours later, I get an email back from their PIO chastising me for not going through the PIO, for one thing, which really is like, he's like, oh, it's the city's policy that you have to go through the PIO. And I'm like, I don't know if you know this, but I don't work for the city.
Right. Yeah.
Oh. So I was like, not only can we not talk to you Friday, we can't talk to you Monday, and we'll just have to let you know when we can get back to you. And again, I'm looking at these numbers. I'm looking at what's happening. Flooding is the worst disaster that can happen to a population, bar none, the most expensive. And I don't know if you remember Yosemite Sam.
Yeah.
Remember?
Fondly.
He would get angry and his head would literally explode. That's what happened to me when I got that email. And I got on the phone, and I got on the text, and I got on the email with every single city council person. I got on with the city manager's office, every person that I could think of in power at the city, and was like, are you seriously not going to be out there and talk to the press about this unfolding public disaster that has to do with basic public safety? Are you serious? Because at this point, that's my story. Yeah. I got a call within a half an hour. I'm
sure
we'll talk to you. Oh, no, we'll talk to you. But I've been having to do that every step of the way. It's not like, oh, they've learned their lesson and they want to talk to me now and, answer my questions, which are very legitimate, basic questions. No. I have to go through it every time. And I'm finding that with all of these government agencies, they act like there's nothing to see here. I mean, the CDCR, the prisons have two major prisons just south of Corcoran, which, there's a levee that's protecting them, but the levee has sunk.
Right. Again, let's go back to the infrastructure part of this, because I want to make sure we get that again, by the way.
You try and ask questions and they act like, go away, pesky kid. And it's like, are you kidding me? This disaster is, what has your government not told you today? That is the theme throughout this whole thing. Sorry.
You're not, but I think I personally think it's going to unfold right before our eyes here the next several weeks.
It is right now.
And I think that, and again, another thought of perspective, in February, at one point with one of the storms, they said there was 18 trillion gallons of water coming down across the state. 18 trillion gallons of water. That's a lot of water. And that's just one storm of the many that we had. We had 10 in a row, or 10, whatever the hell that number was lined up.
We had 30 atmospheric rivers.
Yeah, across the state. I mean, it's nuts. It's really going to be interesting to me, from what I'm seeing and from what I'm hearing, is how these folks are going to react and pivot, because I think that I don't see how we're prepared. I look down at this canal with all the debris. I mean, if you want a styrofoam cooler, I could wait out in the river and get you about 20 of them docked up against one tree, along with all this other stuff, to your point. And if that's not cleared out, that's going to force a whole nother set of issues that the city's going to get into. Talk to me a little bit about this. When you think about this, the city and what's going to be this wake up call, the city of Corcoran in the Valley is potentially screwed, if I'm not mistaken, based on what I'm reading about what the levee does. They're going to have a hard time even with other issues. Is that fair to say?
Oh, it's going to be a mess up there for at least 2 years. In 1982-83, the last really big flood, that water stood on the Tulare Lake because it doesn't have as good a percolation. I can explain why. It doesn't have as good a percolation as we have around the Kern River. It's just a different soil type.
Right.
It stood on that ground for the better part of 2 years, 18 months. It's done. So you're not farming, so you're losing income. People don't have jobs, and it's fetid. It's, people, I see all these people, they read my Twitter, and there are a lot of environmentalists, and they're cheering on the lake, and, isn't it great? No, there's all these birds and all that kind of stuff. And there is, to a certain extent, that is going on. But, this isn't a lake like, on Golden Pond where, a river comes in and it fills up, and then there's an outlet and it kind of constantly regenerates itself. No, this is, it's a giant pond, and it always was. And back in the day, before it was drained, it was, very fetid, and mosquitoes and diseases. And now we've got, added dairies and animal facilities that are within the boundaries of that lake. And it is gonna not be pretty. It's really not going to be pretty. And the devastation to the economy is going to be really awful.
Well, that's
so you have the Tulare, and that's the Tulare Lake bed. I don't know if your viewers, we should orient them.
I want to talk about. Right. I know we have been. Yeah, I want to get into Tulare Lake bed, but one thing I want to go back to the Kern River really quick. And I talked to somebody that's been working up there for I don't know how many years on the dam. And I got a couple questions on that. I want to round that out and we'll jump over to Tulare. But one of the things that he shared with me is that, if the water coming out of the dam goes over, and I thought he told me 7,000 CFS down the Kern River Valley, that it's going to drastically alter the Kern River Valley where the river's running now, because it's not had that much flow of water, and they don't know what it's going to do, what it's going to twist here, twist there, open up a canal that we never knew existed before. Have you heard anything about that as well? That the dam
the Kern River Watermaster has talked about this. So if it goes over the spillway, and there's two things here. There's overtopping the dam, and there's going over the spillway. The spillway is a controlled structure. So if it goes over the spillway, people shouldn't be like, oh my God, the dam's breaking. Oh my God, it's terrible. It's fine. It was built for that. But if it goes over the spillway, they're going to try and reduce then the stuff that comes out of the gates to try and keep it to 7,500 CFS, but they may not be able to contain that. It may go up to 10,000, 12,000 CFS. And if it does that, then we will definitely lose Highway 178. Yeah. It will have to be repaired to a large degree, because there's lots of places, there's 2 or 3 places where it's already coming close. And even in 2017 and 2019, which were big water years, but not like this one, they had places where the river washed out. I mean, so far what we've had is that all of that rain that you mentioned from the atmospheric rivers created situations where the sides of the canyon, had boulders come crashing down. But this is going to be coming up from the bottom. Poor 178. It's been. Yeah,
it's definitely going to be a real big challenge, I think, to get through some of this stuff, because we don't have the infrastructure. We have not put the energy into collecting this water, let alone what we're going to do in a situation like this. And, one thing that I think that I've decided to say is that I'm not using the word drought anymore, just in case I'm just not. I'm done using the word drought in California. It's just called weather. That's what it is. It's just California. It's just Mother Nature. Drought is just a fancy word that we use now. And I just don't think that it is any longer. I think it's just the reality of living here. And we're going through another one of those cycles. I do. I think it's going to be interesting to see.
Well, I hate the word drought because it makes it seem like things are going to get better. And I mean, again, we are always in kind of a water poor situation. I mean, we have it's hard to talk, people may go, what is she talking about? Look at that picture behind her. But this is abnormal. And, we only go through this kind of really big water years now, like every 8 years or so, where they're really big water years. And so you can't count on that. And like I said, in Kern County, most of the river water that is coming down is being recharged, because Kern County agricultural water districts have made just literal careers out of making recharge, all over the place. So we have hundreds of acres of recharge, and we have great sandy soil for that. Further north, a lot of this water is it's just gonna sit on top of, of the land, because especially in Tulare around Corcoran, the reason it's called Corcoran is because it has a layer of Corcoran clay underneath it, and that is almost impermeable to water. So, it can sink down a little ways, and then it takes decades and decades for it to get through the Corcoran clay into the lower aquifer. And that is also why the land is sinking, because people have been pumping it out of that lower aquifer, and then those Corcoran clay pieces collapse in on each other and the land sinks. So that's kind of an unfortunate situation up there. And then just, in Tulare and Fresno counties, they just haven't put the emphasis on recharge and infrastructure like Kern County has. So
Right.
They don't have the plumbing. They don't have, a good, safe place to put it. They are working on farm recharge. A lot of places are trying to do on-farm recharge. And they were doing it sort of experimentally just to see, like, okay, well, if my pistachios or grapes or almonds or what have you stand in a foot of water for a month, what does that do to the plant, kind of thing. And I think a lot of places are doing it now because they have to. It's not experimental. It's just, the water's here. We've got to put it someplace, and it's going on your farm. So there you have it. But anyway.
Yeah. And it's, again, this is going to be interesting. I want to talk about Tulare Lake, because I think this is one that is just fascinating to me, and I'm going to let you run with it, but I want to frame up Tulare Lake for everybody. Tulare Lake was once the largest freshwater lake west of the Mississippi River. So it's not tiny, kids. It's the second largest freshwater lake in the United States based upon surface area. It covers an estimated 790 square miles, creating a biodiverse wetland that encompasses approximately 10% of California. That's a pretty big lake. In the late 1800s, settlers began diverting Tulare's tributaries for agricultural purposes, shocker, incrementally drying the lake and exposing the obviously very nutrient-rich soil. Well, Tulare Lake's been asleep for a long time, but guess who's back? And this is a very, very interesting story. There's a lot to it. I want to get into it. You wrote a couple of great ones. I want to talk about that for sure. But so what's happening with Tulare Lake and what is going to happen there?
Okay. So fast forwarding a little bit on your story, in the 1920s, J.G. Boswell came along and bought up a huge chunk of it. And then there was another family called the Salyers, and they had a huge chunk of the lake bottom. And anyway, Boswell ended up buying Salyer out. So
they're coming up next in our conversation. Don't worry.
So the Boswell Company owns, a huge chunk, I would say most of the Tulare Lake bottom, and they farm it, and they farm tomatoes and safflower and cotton, lots and lots of cotton. They started growing pistachio trees there a couple of years ago, mostly in the higher elevation, because pistachios cannot take standing water. Anyway, because the Boswells own the land, they also own levee system down in the lake bed. So when the water started coming in, because the Tulare Lake is the low spot in the valley, so all rivers, including the Kern River, run to the Tulare Lake at some point if they run high enough. So all those little rivers that I talked to you about, Pozo, Deer, White River, they all run into the Tulare Lake as well. So after that March 10th storm, you started seeing, like, I think it was the Tule River, which normally, I think the channel is rated to like 500 CFS, and it ran
nothing.
It ran at like 5,000 CFS or 10,000 CFS for a while there. So they're all running into the Tulare Lake, but the Boswell Company is accused of holding that water back and using their levees to direct it to not the lake bottom, but to the fringes of the lake,
right?
Which other farmers have accused the Boswell Company of premeditatedly flooding them out.
Correct.
And there's also an accusation that since they held that Tule River water, especially back using the levees, that it caused the Tule River's banks to break further upstream. And in fact, there were at least 50 breaks along that Tule River. Yeah, I mean, it was flowing at 10,000 CFS when I think it's rated for 3,000 CFS. So who knows? And the debris and all that kind of stuff, like I told you before, there's they don't even know
everything.
Who puts all the levees back there. I mean, there's no organization or agency that is in charge of clearing it, making sure, all that stuff has come to play here. So we'll just say, with the benefit of the doubt, is I'm just telling you what the accusations are. So
well, it's a PR nightmare for these guys. Any way you want to cover
right.
it, they're not looking. They're not getting a star by their name as being a good pupil.
So at the same time as that's happening, and these other farmers to the east and to the south and to the north even are getting flooded out, and dairies are having to evacuate in the middle of the night, and all of this terrible stuff is happening. I found that Boswell was planting tomatoes on the southern portion of the Tulare Lake bed, which is where the water would go. It weren't being held off. And so I reported that, I don't know, good, bad, and different. I'm just telling you what the truth is. Here's the tomatoes.
Right.
Here's the tomato plants. Here's where I am. This is what this is looking like. And, when I went out and found all that and was driving around on the levee roads, which on the lake bottom are roads, they're public roads, by the way,
right.
and GPS will tell you that. And you go out there. When I called Boswell's office to say, hey, this is what I'm seeing. This is where I am. Then I got a call from the sheriff. Boswell's people called the sheriff's department, and the sheriff's department called me to tell me not to trespass. And I was like, well, I wasn't trespassing, but that's interesting.
Yeah, that's interesting.
By the way, I could stand on the middle of a public road here, which I have, and I'm taking pictures of crop dusting, fertilizing the land right over, just what they're doing. So, anyway.
Well, look, it goes. But look, it goes back to what we talked about before. Water's the wild, wild west. It is really an interesting business model to look at. It's got a lot of players. I shouldn't rephrase. It doesn't have a lot of players. The players that are involved are deep, deep tentacles. They do a lot of really weird, wild stuff. A lot of it above board, pushing water around. I get, I've seen it myself before in my career in the past when we've had bad water time. But specifically, I because we're on this, and the sheriff is coming after you on a public road because Boswell's got their feelings hurt. They don't want to get in trouble for what they're doing. It's like I said, it's a PR nightmare for them. Talk to everybody. Give them a story about Eric Hansen that you wrote, and because that's a powerful story. If you wouldn't mind.
Eric and Philip Hansen are Hansen Ranches, and aside from Boswell, there's a couple of large organizations there, and Hansen is a very large farming organization there, and they're usually hand in glove. They sit on the same boards, they work together.
Right.
The trucking and fertilizing and crop dusting and all together and stuff like that. But the Hansens got completely flooded. I mean, they lost their homes, they lost their grandmother's homes, they lost their 3,000 acres, they lost their shops, they lost everything. And according to Eric Hansen, who said this all in a public meeting at the King's Board of Supervisors, it was, quote, premeditated on Boswell's part, that they knew that if they held water off in this certain way, and it gets very complex up there if you don't understand the canals, which I don't pretend to understand all the canals and levees because it's very complex, but essentially Boswell held the water off from this one area that ended up pushing it back into the Tule River, which then broke over the Gage Jones Canal. And basically once that happened, it was free for all into the southeastern part of Corcoran. Now, that's the Hansens version of this. Boswell got up at the same meeting, a Boswell representative, George Wurzel, and said, we're not doing anything. We're not keeping anything away from people. We're not, trying to hide the information here. We're not trying to do anything. We're just trying to protect Corcoran. And they, meaning the Hansens, knew very well that they were in an area that could flood. And so we're not trying to do anything differently, Well, and they even said, George Wurzel says, hell, even Lois Henry knows that this can flood here. Because I've done so many stories on the subsidence. Sure. Because like I said, they overpump that ground there and those clay layers sink and that creates subsidence. Well, guess who the main pumper is?
Right.
Boswell's the main pumper up there. So
right.
It's really interesting that the Boswell representatives are up in the Kings County Board of Supervisors saying, we're trying to fight the flood. We're trying to protect Corcoran. Well, they control the levees, and the levees are pushing that water around to keep it off of their plantings.
Right.
And then they're complaining about subsidence that they are a huge contributor to. I just find it really ironic and interesting.
Well, it's just a part of this. It's a part of everything we're going to see play out. Yeah. Well, it's a part of, like we talked about, it's a part of how all this is going to play out because we don't have an infrastructure system to support this. We didn't have one when we had no water, right? When it made the easiest time to do it when you don't have water, right? It's easy to build, but we're at that point. So, if they weren't planting tomatoes down at the lowest end, this probably wouldn't have happened. They probably could have just sent the water down there. And Eric wouldn't be, in the predicament that he's in today, whether or not he's in that predicament or not, based upon geographically what he's sitting at. But what are the ramifications for him at this point? Are there any? I mean, it's kind of like, you can move water off your property and don't really have a lot that, you can push it to your neighbor.
There's nowhere to move it. That area, it's a bowl. It's a bowl
right
down into Angiola, Highway 43 as it comes up to Corcoran. It's created a whole new bowl. And I mean, I've been writing about it for years because I just got on this whole thing because Boswell, what I discovered Boswell was doing a couple of years ago was selling off a lot of their state water and river water and then pumping groundwater to irrigate with. Now, and they pump the groundwater and they would move it up into these what are actually flood cells. So when the floods came, they were full, by the way. So that's another interesting little tidbit. So they were pumping it up into these flood cells and they would hold it for irrigation later in the summer. And I was like, now wait a second, and I'm just like driving all around trying to figure this stuff out. So this has been going on for a while. And I found in the course of doing that reporting, there was because high-speed rail is coming right through there. High-speed rail goes right down by Highway 43.
We need that. We need the high-speed rail. We need 2 of them.
Well, I found this, and again, another, what your government won't tell you. I had heard that there was this engineering report which detailed the groundwater subsidence and the groundwater usage and all that kind of stuff in this area. And so I kept asking high-speed rail for it. And I mean, I saved all the emails, and at some point I'm going to put it together as a timeline of what this PIO was like. No, I don't know about this. I don't know about this. I don't know. I mean, it was ridiculous the way she was trying to throw me off the scent. And I finally got the report and I sent it to her and I was like, yeah, here's the report. I'm going to remember your name. Don't, you can bet on that. I will absolutely remember your name and I will keep all of these emails and it'll come back to haunt you at some point.
Yeah.
I am just that vindictive and childish. But this report, it was done by the Amick Foster Wheeler Environmental Engineering Group. It is terrifying. It talks about how the subsidence is so bad, it has changed the flood zones. So the Corcoran levee that we were talking about a few minutes ago goes on the western side of the town because it used to flood from Tulare Lake. It goes on the western side and then the southern side of the town. That's the way it protects it, and then you've got Highway 43 on the eastern side. It's kind of a triangle, right? Well, guess what the new flood zones are? Eastern side. There's no levee on that side. So that's where we're seeing a lot of that flooding. You see that, Highway 43 never flooded before. There it is. And it goes for miles. And in fact, that's looking right at the Angiola well field where they've documented the subsidence from space. It has a name. It's called the Corcoran Bowl. So anyway, there's just all of these factors coming to play and just, I'm watching it happen in real life. Real time, because I've been writing about this for 2 to 3 years during the drought.
Right. Yeah.
It's just been theoretical, but there it is.
It's like the Wild Wild West. It doesn't have a happy ending at the end of the thing. I mean,
I'm not sure who has the white hat here.
Yeah, no, 100% agree with you. I don't, and to your point, it's like you ask questions, you get shuttled off, you go to try to investigate, you got the sheriff calling you on public ground. It's like a mob mystery, right? It's kind of a trip to listen to all this. Well, I mean, knowing what we know, knowing about the amount of water that's up there, knowing about, all of this stuff that's going. In fact, one of the stats just popped into my head, when the LA River was running, they said between 50, it was one of the chancellors from UCLA had this quote. I'm sure I'll butcher, but I'll get pretty close. Talked about when the LA River was up at 50 to 70%, when it was at that point, I think December, whatever it was, there was enough water passing by that if they could actually capture it, if they could trap that water and do what they need to do it would take care of Los Angeles for an entire year. Just in that moment of time that was right there. It was like, it's unbelievable when I start thinking about what goes out. It's like almost 90% goes back to the ocean, whatever the number is in this great state of ours. So when I think about all this craziness and what you just shared, I mean, what do you think is going to, based upon what the Kern River's doing, what these other rivers are doing, Tulare Lake, which you framed up beautifully to give people an explanation of how much of a problem that's going to be. What do you think is going to end up being the case? I mean, I know it's a crapshoot because we don't know how fast that snow is going to melt and come down. But, I went to public high school. You can kind of do quick math and realize it's not going to be great.
Thanks for joining the Todd-versation. And now, a word from our sponsor.
Thanks for listening to Todd-versations. This episode is sponsored by Shift Creative. Shift Creative brings a fresh approach to design and marketing. Shift's team of expert designers and strategists create content that connects and engages. Our clients are a collaborative part of our process, working directly with the creative team to build their award-winning projects. Specializing in branding, messaging, packaging, marketing, and websites with decades of experience serving the food, agricultural, service, and tech industries, Shift can help your brand to tell its story. Visit startshifting.com to get started. Make a difference with your marketing. Freshen up with Shift Creative.
We asked a climate scientist guy, UCLA guy, very well-known, named Daniel Swain, that exact question, and he said, look, it's either going to come down in a wall of water during a heat wave. That's scenario number one.
Right.
Or it's going to dribble down over time. But either way, at least for sure, Tulare Lake is just going to have water on it forever. And it's just, 2 years, 3 years, and it's going to, kind of ebb and flow, but it's going to be out there. And it's going to be up against levees, and it's going to be on roads, and it's going to weaken power poles, and it's going to ruin septic systems and wellheads, and all of the infrastructure that we're used to is probably going to be so waterlogged and warped that it's going to have to be replaced. And that's the best case scenario. The worst case scenario is we get, a massive wall of water. It comes down from Kern River, because these other reservoirs that I mentioned, by the way, the Cahuilla, the Tule, the Pine Flat, they've been draining the hell out of those. They're like less than a third full, so they're ready for that snow melt. The Kern River is not. It's just people are kind of shutting me out and not wanting to talk to me, and I'm like, look, the math is the math,
right?
The numbers are the numbers, and it's not looking good here, folks. So what's going to happen with the Kern River? And I keep asking, is it going to go up to Tulare Lake? Because at some point it's either going to go into the aqueduct or it's going to go into Tulare Lake if we can't control it. And everyone's like, oh no, tut, nothing to see here. Keep moving along now. And I'm like, if this happens,
what's the plan?
It's going to be really, really bad. It's going to be not just that we get a wall of water, but it's going to be just a wall of water that's just uncontrollable. So,
well, right. The one thing you can't control is water. That's for darn sure. Mother Nature and water is certainly has a mind of its own, whatever it wants to do. And I agree with you. I think that's what scares me the most is I don't think they don't have a plan for a good day, let alone a plan for a bad day.
So, what do I think is going to happen long term is I think that they're going to have to do an after action review in the years, following this, and where did we screw up? What do we need to do? We're going to need to get either flood control agencies that have JPAs, throughout, because these rivers don't care about the county lines. They don't care about city, county, boundaries, all that kind of stuff. We're going to need to get JPAs that link all of these agencies.
What's JPAs? What is that for?
I'm sorry, joint powers agreements.
Right.
So that cities get protected first and foremost, and people get protected first and foremost, but that people know who to call, they know who's responsible, because there was a lot of stuff that was going on after that March 10th storm where, us reporters would be out like, hey, this community says they're flooding over here, who's in charge? Is it BNSF, the railroad, because that's on their property, or is it the stormwater district over here, or is it the county, or is it Cal OES? And all those agencies were like, whoa.
Yeah, right.
Pointing
with five fingers.
Wait a minute, we need a lot more organization here on this stuff, and transparency and communication. And I'm not just saying that because I'm a reporter and I'm frustrated trying to get the story. I'm telling you what Office of Emergency Services people are telling me. Local people who are first responders are telling me they're getting really frustrated with the state. They're getting really frustrated with sort of the lack of, sharing of information. And, this is people's lives and livelihoods, and it's not going to this probably won't happen again in our lifetimes, this massive of amount of flood, but we'll have a 2017, we'll have a 2019 again, those are big water years, and we should, always be on the lookout for this and be prepared. And, part of it is also just like those channel clearing permits that nobody can get. that's a Department of Fish and Wildlife issue. That's like, yeah, I love the critters too, but I don't want to see people's homes destroyed because of a beetle. I'm sorry.
Well, no, I get it, but to think that you can't get a permit for several years to clear out a canal, to get out there and rehabilitate something, because I'll tell you what, the water starts flowing, that what they didn't clear out is going to be a disaster, because it's going to force the water higher. It's not going to allow the water to flow. It's going to start to back up. It's no different than what I see down, when I was down the river. I mean, again, all the styrofoam coolers and all the other crap that's piled up and the debris. That's what happens when you have stuff, because the water's out of the water's over now on the river, that I can see. That's into the trees now. In fact, at one point I was back there Saturday, and there was a couple turtles laying on a log, and you would have thought you were in Louisiana, looking out through as much water through the trees. It's unbelievable.
Yeah.
And so it's going to be something to see. And I think it's good that we gave people some perspective. One thing I got to ask you though, and I don't want to, before I forget, because this is something I've been paying attention to, the Army Corps of Engineers took over the dam up there, right? They're running that thing now.
Well, they built
Why
it.
did the, well, I know that they did. I mean, they revamped it and did all that stuff, but why are they running it now? Is that, and who did they, I was curious about that.
The Lake Isabella has always been a dam, Army Corps of Engineers. Army Corps of Engineers built Lake Isabella for flood control. Because somewhere back in the day, our forefathers knew that this could happen, and somehow we've forgotten, that Mother Nature could do this. But somewhere back in the day, so in the 50s, they built Lake Isabella, and they built Terminus Dam, which is Lake Cahuilla, Schaefer Dam, which is Lake Success, and in the 40s, I think they built Pine Flat Dam. The Millerton is a Bureau of Reclamation dam.
Okay.
It's a different federal agency, but they're all federal dams.
Okay, that was, yeah, it's interesting, because I've been paying a lot of attention to this Water of the USA, some of the stuff they're trying to do with that, and that's going to be another interesting topic we'll have to get into sometime. That's a fascinating journey, and I don't even know what it's going to turn into, but it's working its way into something, that's for sure. Without a doubt. So anything else that we didn't cover? I mean, we went through a whole gamut of stuff. People are going to be like, holy shit, what are these? California is losing appeal anyways. Now it's even got less appeal.
Yeah, well, it's going to be a mess for a while. And really, it just is.
Yeah, I think it is.
Hopefully I'm wrong. Hopefully the math isn't the math. Hopefully Kern River, is completely under control and there's no problem at all. And everything's great, but
yeah, I hope you're wrong too. But I think the problem is that we're not prepared if you're right. And I think that's the part we need to continue to talk about. That's the part that people just don't seem to get the grasp on, and we don't, it's like some of the other stuff that we're doing now. It's like the EV car thing. I harp about this all the time. It's like, yeah, we're going to go do this, but we're not prepared for it. We're still getting conflict minerals. We don't have charging stations. We don't have anything we need to pull this off. It's a great idea, and I love it. Theory, it's wonderful, but you just can't have great ideas without any kind of inside execution, or it just gets off the rails, right? And it's what you're going to see with that. And this is what you're seeing now.
Yeah. Well, I don't know.
Wow.
Well, hope for the best, but keep your floaties handy.
And on that note, folks, we're done. No, you're absolutely right. It's going to be interesting to watch. I'll send you all my pictures I've got. I know, I got some pretty good ones that I took when I was down there. I'm sure you'll get a kick out of seeing some of them. It's going to be something. I appreciate you being here. Let's do it again, and we're giving people an up. Let's see how right or wrong we are in a month.
Yeah, I hope I'm wrong.
I do too. I hope you're wrong, but again, it points out everything that we need to be working on, not in the moment, but leading up to whatever happens next. We need to get our shit together. It's just telltale sign of that. So thank you for hanging out with me.
All right. Thanks, Todd.
Thanks everybody for listening. We appreciate you. Don't forget to check us out on social media, TLC_Todd. You know why I'm on social media, Lois? You know why? Because that's where I get all my water facts, because everybody tells the truth on social media. That's why I go there. Anyway, and by the way, everybody, please get on sjvwater.org. Get the newsletter, get it into your inbox. I'm telling you, it will really inform you about what's going on, because again, water in California is a regional issue, not a state issue. If you understand what's happening in the region, which good luck if you can, because it's pretty complicated, you're really going to learn a lot about what's going on in the state of California for water. So Lois, thanks again for being here. I appreciate you.
Thanks.
Take care, everybody. Go inspire somebody. It's really important. See ya.